Hello. Good to see everyone.
Mm.
I was so funny to have just been with you, so many of you that I can see right here in person last week up in Canada. Nice that we can continue on Zoom together. And good to see those of you who I have not seen in a while. And happy Mother's Day to everyone.
Happy Mother's Day, everybody. Great to see you. Great to see you. Mm.
So as usual, yeah, take the time to check out who's here with us today. Feel the goodness of the support of the Sangha. Mm. And as you're ready, just getting comfortable, seated. Letting your eyes come to close, and as you start to let the attention kind of gather in a more inward way, noticing where the attention's called, and parts of our experience seem most alive. And as we recognize those, acknowledge them, just already starting with the sense of continuity of attention with them. If it's sounds or physical sensations, emotions, other experiences, seeing we can keep up with them moment by moment as they move and change. Or as the attention moves elsewhere. Not losing or giving up this power of concurrent attention with whatever's happening, moving so quickly, always changing. Even when things feel stuck or persistent, if we look closely, we see they're pulsing, throbbing, shifting. The body, the heart. Knowing that it can be helpful to choose a particular field of experience with which we're dedicating this concurrent attention. Maybe it is just the realm of sound, all the tones and textures, vibrations that we hear. Not needing to be heavy with it or harsh, but light, fluid, nimble. Sounds changing. Sounds we like or don't like. preference arising in the mind, notions arising in the mind, recognizing those as the texture and flavor of the mind, different than the sounds themselves. Or letting the attention come into the body, if it feels safe, if we can be interested in the same way, in this range of texture and tone, sensory experience. This aliveness in the realm of physicality also requires a lightness of mind, a nimbleness, a fluidity to stay connected with as it changes in all its dynamism. Maybe it's helpful to narrow that field to where the hands are touching, or where the sensations of the rising and falling of the breath around the abdomen can be noticed. And we just try to stay concurrent with those changing sensations of breathing, air element changing. Wherever we bring the attention, just trying to observe, understand, receive, not manipulate, alter, manage. And of course, the mind will wander. It'll create a little raft to float on in the midst of all this change. Something that feels solid and stable, secure, familiar, comfortable. This raft of me. My thoughts, my hopes, my fears, my memories. We can see the value that serves relief from the unpredictable, the changeable, the undependable in the body, sound, and the senses. Detached, floating above it at times, keeping a distance from the current of direct experience. And we also recognize the disconnection, the fabrication of me and all my worries and plans. You see how it has to keep getting reasserted, recreated, keep us floating. So there's times where we recognize that and We see we don't need it, actually. You let the thoughts come to an end. Let the conjuring come to an end. The composing drift away. And we settle back into the flow of experience directly. The body, sense doors, receiving them as they arise and pass, not fighting, not grasping. Appreciating their fleeting nature. We find ourselves again on a raft. We find ourselves appreciating the protection and weary of the fabrication. And come back over and over again. Understanding the heart's defenses against reality and not fighting them, but allowing ourselves to drop in, receive the unmanaged stream of life. And the heart feels strong enough to bear it. So many of you know that we've been busy teaching this retreat in the coast of British Columbia for the last couple of weeks, and I just got home on Friday. Michelle's been teaching via Zoom while dealing with her medical, physical stuff here at home. So it's all just to say that we don't have a talk prepared for today, but we're are happy to answer any questions people might have about your practice, anything that might be helpful to support you this coming week. And as usual, the easiest way for us to answer questions is if you raise your little Zoom hand, and the reactions button there at the bottom. We can call on you, or if that doesn't work, you can just let us know you have a question in the chat and we'll call on you. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Nicole.
Uh-oh. Did you vanish?
Hi,
Oh, hi.
Hi.
can you hear me? Hello. Um, I guess it's a quick question that could encompass a lot, but I'm having a difficult time being easy on myself when there feels like there's no equanimity at all, especially when so much of it was there at one point, and I have the memory of that. So yeah, just ways to be easier. Just ways to be easier.
In the sense of like that you're being hard on yourself about like your external behavior or your internal behavior under sort of stress and duress, and you don't sort of have access to that. And yeah.
Yeah, and you had given instruction on the recent online retreat about like equanimity practice, going through the senses with it. And I tried to do that once recently, and it was so hard and I just couldn't. So yeah, some of this is just transitioning out of having been very quiet and had, just the conditions of my life are not the same anymore. And so I don't have any equanimity with that either. So yeah.
I can start, and it was something
Sure.
that came out of a question during the Hollyhock retreat, but I think that our idea of peace is often when we have equanimity, so that we are peaceful when anger's coming, right? That unconditional acceptance, so we are peaceful if anger's there, or if we're peaceful, if the equanimity is there in any form. And it's an interesting thing. I think I often will say something like, at first, when I lose the equanimity, may I be at ease with whatever's happening. May I be at ease with anger. May I be at ease with grief. May I be at ease with loss. Like, I don't know if that's helpful, but I think we get some idea in our head that if we are reactive and we don't have equanimity, that we can't find ease And often it's just like switching even a phrase or some kind of way that we can get that actually we can be at ease. It's just that what's happening is how we're even behaving or acting is not what we want. And there is a grief process in that, and it is sad. But I mean, I often will call it there's having equanimity with having no equanimity, and then there's having no equanimity with having no equanimity, right? And so there are a lot of nuances with having no equanimity with having no equanimity and having equanimity with having no equanimity. Does that make sense? That like that phrase might not be helpful for you. Like, may I be at ease with, being reactive, or like it's really getting that it's just that overlay that I mean, it's like a positive and negative in that we really value the equanimity, right? We get that we can be okay with whatever's happening. We value it so much, but then when we get that it's impermanent and we have all the stressors of life and we lose it, we take it so personally. And we forget that these conditions are impersonal. They arise and pass, and maybe there's low energy, maybe there's too much stress and overwhelm. And however, the equanimity goes down or disappears, and we don't feel protected. So I think that just that sense of accepting that and then seeing, I'll remember all kinds of things as ways that to deal with it. Like I remember my first retreat with U Pandita, he said something like, even if you're with just the rising movement of the breath, just that little bit of time, if you're with it, there's no mental torment. And I was like, when things are really rough, it's good to remember that, right? Like really, like maybe we only have that half a breath where we're with it, or half like a part of a sound or part of a step, but actually it's true. It's actually true that in those moments where we're being maybe reaching for the refrigerator door or washing the dishes, and we just get there for a few moments, we're free. We're free of that torment, and maybe a repetitive thought pattern happens again. But it's like the way we take the loss of equanimity as all our fault and that we're no good and we're failing at the practice, and it's so sad. And yet I know it well, so I'm not talking from I'm not guessing at my answer. I really feel like I get it, and it's like it's almost like how can I go from that peace to this, right? And it's conditions. It's like for you, for me, you get a little bit of low energy and you get the lack of equanimity and you get a reaction, and there's boom, the next moment it's self-hatred. And it's totally not your fault. It's conditioned. That's conditioned. And then it's learning what works for you to kind of at least get a glimpse of, Sri Nisargadatta says self-hatred is a grievous error. A grievous error. It's like, then you can lay that on yourself for having self-hatred and making a grievous error. But it's really that sense of, can I be kind? Can I care about myself? Can I get that this isn't personal? Can I get that this is the karmic knot, And sometimes changing the channel, however, again, really changing the channel so that you really, if you don't reach out, sometimes just reaching out to a friend and saying, am I an okay person? Really? Right? Right. No, it's like getting some feedback externally, or, reading something or watching something, or I find looking at the stars if they're out, which they rarely are these days. But if just the stars are pretty, there's such a big change of the channel. there's such an immensity there that it sometimes puts into perspective how we've lost touch with that immensity, which is so important to find again, that vastness of the universe, and how personal we're taking these things. Getting, of course, ideally you get enough space to find some equanimity. That's okay. Yeah.
I don't know if I have any. I have things to say, but they all feel very much like tacking on to what Michelle's already said. The sense of conditionality and how it works, right? There's this like classic phrase that I probably won't say right, of like, with the arising of this comes the arising of that. With the cessation of this comes the cessation of that. When this arises, that arises. When this ceases, that ceases. And so there's just something of like whatever the this and the that are in those it can be any millions of things. And just the recognition that you have, right, already, and as Michelle's pointed out, that there is some level, it's like you simply just don't have the conditions that lead toward your ability to find that grounding and equanimity. You're more exposed to all of the stuff. You don't have the kind of protections that you have had, over the past period of time for that. And so it's like, this is what happens, right? This is with the arising of that, or with the falling of these conditions leads to the falling of the equanimity, right? And it's like, it's totally, as Michelle's saying, it's totally not personal. We are, until we're fully enlightened, our mind states and the realities of our bodies and all of the sense doors are going to be dependent upon conditions, right? And that we're working to get that sense of freedom from conditions and peace no matter what. But it's the hardest thing for the heart to learn how to do. And it learns it by going through what you're doing, which is to say how hard it is when the conditions are not supportive to find our way through the kind of thicket, of just all the other stuff that's happening in our hearts and minds and bodies, and of course in the world around us. So I would say I hope part of it is alleviated with like the ending of the semester, like coming up, right? And that it's like, okay, there's some shift that happens there in terms of the conditions. Are you in Manhattan? I don't know how available the night sky is. But like, I know there's like a planetarium at the like Natural Science Museum or whatever. I mean, there's ways of getting versions of that experience, that are helpful. And so everything Michelle mentioned, and to know that it doesn't have to feel always like spiritual things, but like going to a movie and changing the channel, and going to the park. Luckily, the weather is shifting, and so there's a little more sense of like we have maybe more access, no matter where we are, to some outdoor things that might be sort of nourishing for us or even neutral. And I want to say again, like adding on to what Michelle is saying, there's something about that deep equanimity that we long for, of like that flavor of peace that's so beautiful and such a relief. I think it's also important to see that like sometimes equanimity also has a very neutral flavor, or is flavorless in a certain way, right? Because of its neutrality. And so that when you think about what that might mean in terms of having equanimity with anger or with anxiety, whatever, sadness, there's a way in which it's like you don't have to always try to feel like, oh, can I be peaceful with this? Can I bring this thing that is not present and see if I can feel it present with anger? That the experience of equanimity with anger, we'll just say anger, it might be more direct and more invisible, which is to say you're just not resisting it. You're just angry. and there is anger, and there is the feeling of it, and there is the like we're in the being in it, and there isn't the sense that you need to get out of it in order to feel safe or to be peaceful, but that the neutral kind of flavorless version of equanimity can kind of be there in and out in a way where you are experiencing it within the context of anxiety, fear, sadness, anger, whatever it might be. I think that's it. And just as part of what Michelle is describing, and it's like it's finding the neutral in our lives in this sense that there might be more places where it is happening that we're not attuning to. The rising, half of the rising of the breath, or one step, or just noticing, seeing, when we're walking down the street. It's like if you can tune into the many places where there might be more neutral experience or even pleasant experience, and start to see the ways that our minds are oriented at times towards seeing only the negative, only the unpleasant, only the difficult, and builds a belief that that is all we are experiencing and that is the world that we live in. But that belief is sort of more rooted in kind of in karmic knot, kind of entanglements of belief about ourselves and our lives that we just have to have some skepticism around, right? You get a sense of this flavor that's familiar of like, oh, I'm caught in a loop that feels like very cozy and very horrible, right? That's like very familiar. And the sense of like, maybe I shouldn't totally believe this perspective is sort of like can be helpful of just getting a little bit of sense that at times you can find some space around it. Yeah.
I think I'll piggyback on that
Mm-hmm.
last thing Jesse said, which is I think that it's harder to talk about this in relationship to self-hatred sometimes, but I think it's important in what Jesse just said. And it's like that sense that we never know what's going to happen, and the vulnerability of that the truth is we never know what's going to happen next. And there's just a shared vulnerability we all have with that, whether we're a gecko or a bird or a human. And when Jesse was talking about the familiar patterns, that one familiar pattern for some people in relationship to not being able to just be vulnerable and accept that right, accept the equanimity disappeared, right? That you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know when it's going to come next. So that impermanence and the vulnerability of that, like when we lose the ground of that, often the aversion to the vulnerability or the attachment to something more familiar there will actually come in to protect us, like Jesse was just saying. And I think that self-hatred for some of us is that conditioning. It's a preemptive strike against not being able to control what's happening. And it's a very painful defense, but it works. One doesn't feel that deeper vulnerability there. You're just like hating yourself, right? And it's like, I'm not suggesting this can happen all the time, but once in a while, one can at least remind oneself that it's a defense, that the self-hatred is actually, you're trying to give yourself credit, like for trying to protect yourself, and that it's a learned, very deep protection, even though it feels terrible. And then to kind of sometimes actually get interested in it, like like learn, like kind of look at what are the conditions that brought this about, and what brought them about last time, and what didn't bring them about, or just kind of like, for me it's that sense of, well, of course I'm feeling self-hatred right now, right? Like it's like, of course, it's like you understand the conditions and you understand that it's familiar, and that it's often in that place, it starts to get less solid. It gets just less solid and less oppressive. There's spaces between it. And, that's also partly what Jesse was just saying. And I was saying, it's like you take breaks, you go out and look at something pretty, and you see the beauty. Look at the peonies. People are sending me peonies from Canada and East Coast, and it's like just there's so many petals, like there's something so amazing about it. And even if you take 10 minutes to just see the peony and then feel your own beauty and see the peony, that can be helpful. I'm not saying it can also always be helpful. It cannot be helpful, but finding things that are really immediate ways to change the channel. And of course, a comedy or tragedy or something to really change the channel is also helpful, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Sarah had a question in the chat here. How to deal with the period where I feel unconscious or not even aware about feelings. Sarah, do you want to say more, or we could just jump on that?
No, I think you can stop.
Mm-hmm. I think it's such a cool question because my sense of like that you're aware that there's probably something happening that you're not seeing, and that it matters, that there's like a danger in maybe not seeing our feelings or something like that. So I appreciate the kind of like sense of kind of concern, and that seems kind of underlying it. And then I think what's so cool about this practice, one of the things that I trust so much about it, is that it is very clear that the instructions are always just to observe what's present, right? To not try to see something that you don't see, because like that's sort of like the essence of all of the Buddha's teachings is like it's what is directly observable. This, is there a self or is there whatever? It's like we can believe in all kinds of things and have all kinds of views, but what are we actually seeing when we look closely? And so that is all we can say is true, and that there's something so beautiful in that and so pure, because it's like, yes, all I can say is true is that, oh, there's pressure and there's tension and there's tightness, oh, and there's unpleasant, there's disliking, there's wanting, there's a thought, there's a whatever. It's like all there is that we really can say is like one thing in the present moment, that we can say this is real, and then it's gone and then there's a new real. So this idea ultimately that like you don't feel like you're having a sense of connection to your emotional world right now, it's good to notice that. Part of it is the sense of noticing the presence of something or the absence of something, right, that was once there and is no longer. But that the implication of the instruction is also that like you just you trust the heart a little bit in terms of when it feels dull, when it feels neutral, when it feels what's the word I'm looking for?
Numb.
Numb. Yes, thank you. Numb. Right. Sometimes there's this numbness of the heart that is actually a kind of protection, and that's real. That's like you don't need to argue with it. You don't need to antagonize it. It's like you feel the kind of realm of the mind, you notice thoughts, and you maybe just don't feel a mind state or an emotion present, and like it doesn't matter what's happening in the body, what's happening in the breath, sounds, etc. So to me, it's like I both feel like really. I think it's really cool that you notice that there's like what feels like the lack of presence of something, and yet to not feel like it's a problem, and simply kind of keep exploring, and that we have to trust the heart at times to numb out, to see where it's like sometimes things feel too volatile, too much voltage, and it just feels like, oh, we're gonna kind of like turn off the switch flips or something, and to trust that maybe that's what it needs for whatever reason right now, and that there are plenty of other phenomena in our sense experience to observe, to keep teaching. I don't know. Michelle, any more thoughts on that?
Just that I tend to relate to numbness as an emotion. so I think sometimes we will think like, I'm not feeling anything, but actually numbness is a feeling. It's not like an absence of feeling. It's a feeling that's numb. It's a feeling. And so that, I hope that's helpful. It's a very simple thing, but I think that, I think particularly for all of us, when we have somebody we're close to die, somebody we really love die, then you know that grief process includes so much numbness. I mean, it includes so much like need to not feel the grief and to actually, it's clearer, I think, in these places what Jesse's saying, where the system just it actually takes care of it. We have very little choice of whether we're going to be feeling grief or not, or whatever other emotions. But in these times like that, it often becomes more visible that the numbness is really important. Not just like it's an emotion, but something that protects us, as Jesse's saying, from too much voltage, too much overwhelm. Yeah. It's really important to let your system know that instead of hating the numbness or not liking it, that actually that you're grateful for it. That's the practice I recommend, if you can, to be grateful for it and to thank it. And then your system that is needing to be numb will think like, oh, maybe she appreciates me. Maybe like I don't need to be quite as numb, because you're not trying to fiddle with the defense system that's so fragile often at times for us, you know. That's what you get I'm encouraging, basically getting a healthy relationship with the numbness and an appreciation, in which case you get more of a relationship of trust with yourself.
So
It's
would you suggest to practice, I mean, maybe metta or something like that at this moment, like trying to accept a little bit more and have more love or loving kindness for this
anything, yeah, compassion, care, tenderness. It's just like some way that you feel, yeah, care and kindness, or metta, loving kindness for that part of yourself. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. As long as you're not trying to force it to feel something. You know, it's weird because we're on both ends of like, they're the doer and the receiver. And so it's like you want to be careful that you're not trying to do metta in order to like jumpstart a kind of feeling, right? It's like if you're doing the metta because you trust it, you trust the heart, its protection of itself, and that you can connect with that caring for the defense, then yeah, it's beautiful. But to be careful that we're not trying to like make something happen, you know? Yeah.
It's a good question.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Okay.
I think it might be connected with numbness as protection from grief, and just seeing, like, slowly accepting, pretending that I'm okay, and feeling that that's great because I can't take otherwise. But that seeing that over and over often leads to kind of, oh my God, like it's so big. and it really allows me to see how much I'm pretending, and finding a space to, oh yeah, I don't really need to pretend there is wonderful. And I see the expectation of, oh, like I really learned this and I'm expecting this. But the depth of grief seems so bottomless, and it might be bottomless, and if that's bottomless, that's great. But I think I get, there's a doubt and there's grief and there's like, I feel paralyzed often in the practice and daily life, and I just go with it. It's paralyzed and just like freeze, and that's awesome. But there are moments that's a little more unconscious and low energy that like I can't handle it. And then it just repeat of like, then go to healthy distraction. And then when the energy comes back up and going back to and doing the cycle, and I'm content with that. But there's a part of me that like really want to get out of it. And I don't really know. And the intensity of everyday life is adding so much that seeing clearly that process over and over is not exactly helping me. Doesn't seem like, maybe it is, I don't know, but yeah.
I have a question, just like what would it helping you look like to you? Like what do you think it would look like to you if it was helping?
Maybe a less intensity of everything. That might be what I imagine. That imagine of help. I don't know. When I imagine help, less intensity.
Yeah. I mean, because there's many ways Jesse and I can go with answering your question, but what comes to mind like at first is that you feel, to me, it seems like you're describing samsara itself. Like that there's a way in which, no, really, that samsara is this like endless like loop that we keep repeating lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. And that depending on our, that particular birth and that particular set of conditions, we repeat certain patternings and then we die, and then there's certain patternings and we die. But what's critical that I think in what you're saying is that it sounds like you are, you have like worked with this so much and so hard, and it's like so clear. And I think where it could get less intense is with the identification with it. And that's not going to come easy. That's going to come slow, but it will. Like I already hear it's happening, but it's like that for all of us, whatever we're repeating and repeating, and we're paying attention to it. And it's actually, the more you pay attention to it, the more intense it will feel. And it can be really hard. And of course, you're taking the healthy distractions, but that's not stopping the pattern, which is true, right? And so you're really getting something on a very deep level. I mean, I really bow to you for getting to this point. It's incredible. And often there's a kind of like surrender that happens around not necessarily seeing that you get out of the pattern in terms of its repetition, but doing what you're doing is really important. But that actually where it unhooks is in our identification with it. And that will happen at times. And that's what I would recommend, that, of course, the more space you can get, the more you won't identify with it. But it's like, we all can like analyze ourselves from that, like the layer of reality that is a more psychological body emotional patterning. It's like we have a lot of help to analyze it, and to see if we can get out of it. But actually there's also a way to get out of it by not taking it personally. And I'm not saying this is easy. I think you've done incredible. Really, like I really hope you'll take that in. I'm really checking to see if you're taking it in.
Yes. And
Because like
I,
you
I
are
do.
like awesome. You're really doing great, right? But it's like I think you're against the wall
And
and
there's part, yes, and I really have the appreciation of the practice and the condition that I could practice this. And there's a part of me that like I'd rather not. Like I'd really rather not.
of course. It's
And
okay. Try it. Like, I don't want to be mindful anymore. Go, we can do that and we can do it for a while. I think you're too cooked to really pull it off entirely. I hate to say that, but I think you've been at it too long and you're too sincere and you have the karma of being a yogi, but it's like, yeah, like maybe, I mean, the other side of it would be, are you trying too hard in certain levels other than disidentifying? There is that level of, is there a way to lighten up? I've been always, in my early years, I was always accused of not having enough fun. And, like, okay, lighten up, but like, okay, lighten up. So try lightening up. I don't know what that would mean for you, but that does help, but I think there is a part of you that really wants to get free.
yeah, no, 100%. And that I do feel certain level of freedom for sure through practice that I've been doing with y'all. And there's actual measurable practical thing that's manifesting in my life. And yeah, it's I guess it's like so unknown that I'm experiencing that I never imagined that my life would come to where I am. And it's awesome. Like it literally is awesome that like it's fearful and also like great beyond my imagination. Um, and I just get so scared of even going to like practicing not being identified. Or I really understand that. And y'all pass me knowledge of how to do that. And that's feels okay. Like where am I going then? Like it's just gonna get so intense. I'm not asking you where I'm going, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's awesome. I'm with Michelle. I think it's awesome. And it's horrible. I mean, which is to say, it's horrible. I understand. It's like, I think there is a place for Christ. Like there's the spiritual value of crisis, of like genuine, authentic crisis. Of like there is the part of us that just wants to be free from all this the cycle, and then there's this other part of us that just wants the cycle to spit us out where we want to be. It just wants to resolve. It wants satisfaction in samsara. And that's just like boom, boom, boom. It's like these two powerful forces. And when we really are honest about them, both, it's so hard. And you're not denying, the truth of both, and that it's hard to reconcile them. And so I think, yeah, just it's very beautiful where you are. And you have to take such care of yourself and be really careful, because you also don't want to use that sort of it's like the tendency to use the crisis to push harder, and to know that that's just not going to work, because you're going to be doing it from a place of aversion, of not liking it, right? Versus like, where does it lead to surrender, right? Of like this sense of disenchantment, of where do we stop? Where does the heart want to be released from the longing to have things be the way we want them to be? And that is a huge order. So it's like you have to just be so careful and gentle, with yourself in the process, like Michelle's saying. You know, I have little thing, just in terms of that sense of like pretending you're okay, yeah, the sort of the dishonesty of it, the disconnection, from other people that sort of feels like it pulls us into. Always, it's just like, where in your life can you be okay to not be okay? Where, with whom, or alone? Where are there times where we are too social, or we have too many other people? The call to keep presenting in a certain way is just so relentless that it feels hard to, like, where is there a place, where can we get some place where we don't need to pretend, and what does that feel like? And then I think the carefulness there is also this sense of like, oh, well, it feels like a terrible black hole that is bottomless. That's what it feels like. And so you have to be like, okay, wait, this it's just to remember the classic, Theravada and Vipassana thing is like, there is no depth. There is no space. There isn't an endless pit. There is just this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And there's nothing, there is no dimensionality to it on one level. And that sometimes the momentariness of experience is actually a refuge from the sense of our feeling lost in the kind of the perception of dimensionality of like, there is this bottomless pit in the heart versus like, oh, there's this experience now, there's this experience now, there's this experience now. And that is part of the key of unhooking also from the identification piece, right? Is the like trying to be so careful about our belief, again, these deep karmic knots of what it is that we're experiencing and what's next and where is it leading. I mean, it always is this thing of like, whatever we're leaning in towards wanting or fearing, the next moment is just like, is there that place where like, okay, well, this is what's happening now. This is what's happening now. This is what's happening now. And the notion of something beyond that can dissipate, and including the notion of like a me that is, beyond or experiencing or whatever, so yeah, it's a beautiful place. It's a very critical place. And I know that we both would just say it's like to try to actually be able to manage it while working and socializing and being in the world and reading the news. And it's like, it's a very difficult, and that the more time you can carve out to be quiet and have retreat, have space, like that is absolutely a part of like the method, right? That allows us to sort of feel like we can manage it. And that if we can't do that like tomorrow, right? And we know that we have some period of time where we're going to have to stay in the world, that we do lower the expectations of what we are trying to ask the heart to do. Where it's like, okay, we get that actually these patterns are just a little bit of the cycle and the rhythm of how we survive and make it in the world. And that you don't try to have this expectation and the pressure on the heart mind to like come to sort of like vast peace in the midst of what is such a powerful barrage, Phew. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I had one question, a second question, which is, how much metta or karuna are you doing?
It's like my last resort for sure. Like, oh yeah, like resistance and like I can't take it anymore. Right, great compassion.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Yeah. I just doubt that I'm not exactly sure how to care for this. I've never been cared for what I'm dealing with, and I don't know what that means to care for that. Like whatever the pain that I'm experiencing, and I think I do know, like, being lightly accepting the pretending that I'm not gay. Oh, like I'm not good. Like I never say good when I'm asked how are you anymore. I sometimes say I'm shitty, and I'll just smile and move on. But that really creates also like isolation from um just folks around me. That brings sadness and distance and belonging, longing for belonging. Um
Well, I mean, if you could move from it being last resort to the second to the last resort, that would be great. Because I think that a lot of what you're describing feels like, that I'm not saying this is easy for me as well, so I'm not trying to push too much of it, but I think that the sense that this trajectory you're on, if you don't have enough of a relationship with feeling shitty yourself, then needing other people to be interested in that and you to feel less isolated is probably not a great strategy, for example. And I think that's where loving kindness or compassion comes in, that the more you can have a care or a kindness, some relationship where you're accepting that you feel you that you don't have to pretend you're okay to yourself, and that you get a relationship with all these parts that maybe a lot of the people in the world have no interest in. And that's why you learn to pretend. The way we all learn to pretend by the time we get through kindergarten is because there's not that many people that are interested.
Nobody cares.
Yeah, nobody does care. And so there's a reason why we do it. And it's like the learning that has to happen around ourselves with ourselves. The disconnect we learn from ourselves is all conditioned. We learned it from others, right? And so we might not be able to totally relearn that, like undo it with others, as much as we might want it, and we might have some friend or friends that we could play around with it enough. But if you get too dependent on people for it, they pull away. It's just the way the world works mostly, and it's sad, but it's like, again, I don't think you can go from what you just said, where you don't have any idea about how to care for this part of you, but it's this part of you is showing itself to you, so there has to be enough care. It wouldn't show itself to you. And it's just like, my sense again is, this juncture in your spiritual journey is, like Jesse said, it's like a crisis, but usually that's when the Brahma Viharas are essential, And if you're at 1% with them, then you get up to 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and it just takes time.
I think I would just add that don't always feel like you need to have metta or compassion for this most difficult thing.
Yeah.
It's like you have, for a spider you see in the corner, like if you can feel it for that, the object of it doesn't matter at all. That's like the object is actually irrelevant to the fact that you can feel. It's like the experience of compassion for any object is doing the same work internally, so to feel like to not let the mind trick you to think that you're failing if you're not able to feel a sense of love or tenderness toward this particular thing that's like very hard to even find that relationship with, but that whatever you can practice metta or karuna with is going to build the same capacity, and it doesn't matter at all like what the object is. So just think about like that there's the more dexterity in terms of method. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Really wonderful.
Good luck. Good luck this week. Good luck.
Go get them. Take care of yourselves, each other.
See you next Sunday.